These statistics are unbelievable. 33 minutes, 7 points, 1 of 12 from the field. What is that, like 7%? 7%? 16 boards. Me bounce. Me bounce. Me bounce. Me bounce. Oh, boy. She had 2 turnovers, 5 personal fouls. Guys, Angel Reese was blocked 6 times.
That stat line is the kind of thing that stops the conversation cold. 7 points, 1 made basket, and 6 shots sent back. But the numbers alone still do not explain why this performance immediately became ammunition in one of the loudest player debates in the WNBA.
Hell last night. Pure hell. Locked in hell. Wow. Got to be way more careful. Holy. Don't ever compare Caitlin Clark to Angel Reese ever again. I mean, officially, let's not ever compare these two ever.
And there it is, the comparison. Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese have been tied together by fans, media, awards debates, rookie conversations, television ratings, and social media arguments for so long that almost every bad night from one player gets turned into evidence for the other side. But there is a much bigger problem buried inside this game, and it is not simply that Reese missed shots. Later, we need to talk about why the way she missed them matters more than the raw shooting percentage.
Angel Reese went off tonight. 7 points. They got it as 1 of 13. I've actually seen 1 of 13 in multiple places now. 5 fouls, 6 blocked 6 times. This is unbelievable.
Whether the final box score is listed in one place as 1 for 12 or somewhere else as 1 for 13, the basic picture does not change. Reese had a disastrous offensive night. That is not an insult. That is a basketball observation. And this is where the conversation has to be more serious than people screaming bad game at each other. Every star has bad nights. Caitlin Clark has had ugly shooting nights. Ajayi Wilson has missed shots. Sabrina Ionescu has had cold stretches. Great players do not become immune to bad performances. The real question is what happens when your weaknesses are the exact weaknesses a defense is built to expose. That is what makes this game interesting. If Reese simply went 2 for 10 while taking clean jumpers that normally fall, you shrug and move on. But when a player repeatedly struggles at the rim, gets challenged vertically, has trouble creating separation, and cannot punish the defense with another reliable scoring option, suddenly a rough box score starts revealing structural problems instead of random variance. And that is why this particular game hit differently.
Yeah. So, there's Angel right there. Driving in. She's driving in. Clank. I'm driving down the lane. Here I go. Here I go. Will she quit dribbling the ball all the way down the court? She just got blasted. Wow.
Watch the sequence the host is reacting to. Reese is trying to create offense through traffic, but the defense does not appear terrified of giving her space. That is important. A dominant interior scorer changes the geometry of the floor. Defenders collapse early. Help comes before the catch. Weak side players cheat into the paint. Fouls pile up because everybody is desperate to stop the finish. But if defenders believe they can stay disciplined, meet you at the rim, and force you to finish over length, the advantage flips. That is where Shakira Austin becomes central to the story. The transcript frames Austin as the player who had Reese in hell, and while that is obviously exaggerated commentary, the basketball point underneath it is legitimate. Size and rim protection can turn Reese's preferred scoring areas into crowded spaces where every attempt becomes harder. Now add something else. Reese's rebounding is unquestionably a major part of her value. 16 rebounds in a bad offensive game still matter. That is real production. But rebounding does not automatically erase inefficient possessions. Those are two separate parts of the game, and both have to be evaluated honestly. A player can be elite on the glass and still have a rough offensive night. That should not be controversial.
Again. How the F is this a real shot chart? Wow. Wow. And she got blocked like a toddler out there 6 times. Guys, I keep saying it. Yeah, she's missing her own she's missing her layups. And in some cases, never even getting there. Wow.
This is where the shot chart becomes more revealing than the jokes. If nearly all of your attempts are coming around the basket, efficiency is supposed to be your friend. Those are generally the shots offenses want. Layups, putbacks, short finishes, opportunities created by offensive rebounds. If a player is living in that area and still cannot convert, the defense has achieved something significant, and that gets us closer to the real issue. Reese does not need to become Caitlin Clark. She does not need a 30-foot jumper. She does not need to run pick and roll like a point guard. Comparing their skill sets one for one is not especially useful because they play completely different positions and create value in completely different ways. But if Reese wants to take the next step from high-impact rebounder to unquestioned offensive star, she needs counters. A counter can be a reliable short jumper. It can be a stronger right-hand finish. It can be a quicker move before the second defender arrives. It can be better footwork to create an angle instead of trying to power straight through a taller defender. It can be improved touch off the glass. Anything that forces the defense to hesitate. Because if a defender knows where you are going, when you are going there, and what the finish is probably going to look like, athleticism alone becomes easier to neutralize. That is what 6 blocked attempts are screaming at you. Not this player is terrible. Not this career is over. They are screaming that the defense found something and kept going back to it.
Oh, gosh. Ew. How dare her have a bad game like every other athlete? Please. Do you know how many of these videos I've made? 1 game. 2 games. Stop it. Can we quit? Oh, the Bricklayer Barbie Construction and Court Edition.
The obvious defense from Reese supporters is right there. Athletes have bad games. Correct. But that argument only works if criticism is being based on 1 game in isolation. The more important question is whether the game exposed something that has appeared before. That distinction matters. If a 50% three-point shooter suddenly goes 0 for 6, that is probably just a bad night. If a player who already has questions about finishing efficiency repeatedly gets blocked and struggles on close attempts, the performance fits an existing concern. That does not mean every criticism is fair. Some of the commentary around Reese becomes personal very quickly. People mock her name, her appearance, her personality, her celebrations, her fans, and everything except the basketball. None of that is required to analyze the game. The basketball is already dramatic enough. You have a player with a huge profile, major attention, strong rebounding production, Team USA discussion around her, and a fan base that believes she belongs in conversations with the league's biggest young stars. When that player has a night where the offense completely collapses, scrutiny comes with it. The same thing happens to Clark. The difference is what each player has already shown they can do when defenses take away option number 1. That is where the comparison becomes much more complicated.
Woo! 1 of 12. It's ugly. It's ugly. It really is. She has about a 3-inch vertical leap. If you really pay attention, she's got about a 3-inch vertical leap.
The host makes the vertical leap joke, but strip away the exaggeration, and there is a basketball question underneath it. How does Reese consistently finish against length? That is the developmental challenge. Reese is not playing against undersized college defenders anymore. WNBA front courts are full of players who are stronger, longer, more disciplined, and more experienced at timing contests. The windows are smaller. The second jump matters. Footwork matters. Balance matters. Release point matters. And this is why offensive rebounding can sometimes create a misleading visual. A player misses, gets the rebound, tries again, gets another rebound, and suddenly the possession produces multiple boards even if it produces 0 points. That does not make the rebounds fake. They count because the player actually earned them. Offensive rebounding is a skill, but the sequence also tells you something about finishing. Both things can be true at once. Reese can be one of the best rebounders on the floor and still need major improvement converting those extra opportunities. Fans get trapped because they think they must choose one side. Either every rebound proves she dominated, or every missed layup proves she has no value. Basketball does not work like that. A player can have an elite skill and an obvious weakness at the same time. In fact, most players do. The difference between good players and great players is often what happens when opponents force them into the weaker part of their game.
I don't know how she made Team USA. Yeah, for real. I mean, that's... Ugh. But she's the next Shaq. I mean, Jordan. But don't forget, it's all she does.
Now we reach the Team USA angle, and this is where one bad performance gets attached to a much larger argument. The host asks how Reese made Team USA, and mocks the idea that she should be treated like a transcendent offensive player. Those are two different claims, and they should not be blended together. National team selection is not determined by one offensive box score. Coaches can value rebounding, defense, physicality, versatility, energy, and role fit. A player does not have to be the best scorer at her position to have value in a roster construction. But once you are selected for high-level honors, the standard rises. That is unavoidable. People are going to compare you with other players who were selected, players who were left out, players with similar positions, and players with similar publicity. That is the cost of being prominent. And Reese is extremely prominent. She is not treated like an anonymous rotation player. She is discussed like one of the faces of the sport. She receives endorsement attention. Her games create reaction videos. Her rivalry history with Clark remains part of the league's biggest media storyline. So when the public profile says superstar, fans expect superstar-level solutions. That does not necessarily mean 25 points every night. It means when one part of your game is taken away, what is the answer? That is the unresolved question this performance put back on the table.
If someone blocks your shot and you get the ball back, is that considered a rebound? These games are so hard to watch, basically glorified high school ball. There's truth to that statement. Sometimes these games are brutal. Brutal. Even fever games, sometimes you're like, there will be stretches for...
And the question about whether a blocked shot followed by recovering the ball can become a rebound points toward another argument that has followed Reese for a long time. How should people evaluate her rebounding numbers when some boards come after her own misses? The simplest answer is that rebounds are rebounds under the official rules. If you miss, the ball comes off the rim, and you secure it, you have created another possession opportunity. That has value. But evaluating basketball requires more than reading one column in a box score. If a player collects an offensive rebound after her own miss and then scores, great. She extended the possession and created points. If she collects multiple rebounds after repeated misses but never scores, the possession is less valuable than the rebound total makes it look in isolation. That is why efficiency metrics in film matter. This is also why the Clark versus Reese argument becomes so emotional. The players create value in almost opposite ways. Clark bends defenses with passing range, ball handling, shooting gravity, and transition creation. Even on a poor shooting night, defenses often react to where she is standing. Reese creates value through physicality, rebounding, extra possessions, activity, and interior presence. Those are different basketball currencies. So saying they should never be compared is too simple, because stars will always be compared. But pretending the comparison is purely about points and rebounds is also too simple. The more useful question is whose strengths are hardest for a defense to erase. That is where nights like this become important evidence.
Look, we just thought Caitlin Clark had a down game. A down game. Caitlin Clark still in the MVP conversation. Had a rough last 3 minutes of the game the other night. Oh, man. Woo-wee. You realize how good Caitlin Clark is when you see performances like this. This might be the worst performance in the history of the WNBA.
Now go back to how the host opened the segment. He starts by talking about Caitlin Clark having a rough ending to a game, then immediately uses Reese's performance as a contrast. That tells you what this video is really about. It is not just Angel Reese versus Shakira Austin. It is the never-ending attempt to rank two players who entered the professional game, carrying a rivalry that was bigger than almost any normal rookie storyline. Clark gets criticized for turnovers, late-game mistakes, poor shooting stretches, defense, and the massive expectations attached to her name. Reese gets criticized for efficiency, finishing, offensive polish, and how much of her production comes through rebounding. Every bad performance becomes a referendum. Every good performance becomes revenge. And because the fan bases are already waiting to attack each other, nuance disappears almost instantly. But there is a useful comparison available if you ignore the tribal part. When Clark plays poorly as a scorer, she can still alter a game as a passer. She can create shots for teammates. Her shooting reputation can still pull defenders away from the paint. She can force traps or hard hedges simply because of what might happen if she gets clean space. When Reese struggles around the rim, what offensive counter currently changes the defense? That is the question, and this is the payoff the game revealed. The problem was not that Reese had one awful shooting night. The problem was that the defense appeared comfortable forcing her into the same type of difficult finish repeatedly because the alternative punishments were limited. That is much more important than the jokes.
Last night, in a game between the Atlanta Dream and the Washington Mystics, Shakira Austin had Angel Reese in hell. Jason goes to hell. Nah. At the end, Freddy Krueger comes up, grabs Jason's mask, it was Shakira Austin reaching up, grabbing Angel Reese's face, dragging her under the dirt.
Shakira Austin is the name that should not get lost in all the Reese versus Clark noise. Because if one player struggles, somebody else usually deserves credit. Defense is not an accident. Blocks are not just offensive failure, they are also defensive timing, positioning, length, discipline, and anticipation. When a defender repeatedly meets a scorer at the rim without constantly fouling, that changes confidence. A player begins thinking about the shot blocker before the shot even goes up. She may rush the release, pump fake when she should finish immediately, bring the ball lower, hesitate, search for contact, try to create an angle that is not there. That is how one or two early defensive plays can influence the next 6 possessions, and once that happens, the matchup becomes psychological as much as physical. The offensive player starts trying to solve the previous possession while the defender is already prepared for the next one. Austin deserves credit for making the paint uncomfortable. That matters because the WNBA is too often discussed as if offense happens in a vacuum. A player goes 1 for 12, and people immediately ask, what is wrong with her? Sometimes the better question is, what did the defense do to her? That does not excuse every miss. It explains why the misses may have happened. And if Reese wants to dominate those matchups in the future, the adjustment has to be specific. Quicker decisions, better angles, more touch, more patience when patience is available, but less unnecessary hesitation when the opening is already there. A dependable shot from 5 to 10 feet would change everything because defenders could no longer camp at the rim waiting for the drive. That is how one added skill can unlock an entire offensive game.
That's crazy. AR fans talking trash about CZ fans last night just for Angel to play like this. Woo! 1 of 12. It's ugly.
The fan reaction is predictable because sports social media operates on receipts. One side celebrates when Clark struggles. The other side waits for Reese to have a worse night. Then everybody screenshots old posts, and the game becomes secondary. That may be entertaining, but it also explains why these debates become impossible to resolve. If your conclusion is decided before the opening tip, every stat becomes evidence for what you already wanted to believe. Reese grabs 16 rebounds. Her supporters say dominance. She misses nearly everything. Critics say exposed. Clark posts 10 assists. Supporters point to playmaking. She turns the ball over late. Critics call her overrated. Same pattern. The smarter way to evaluate young players is development. What looked weak 6 months ago? What improved? What still gets targeted? What happens when playoff-level defenders game plan for it? That is the standard that matters, because neither player is a finished product. And for Reese specifically, the roadmap is obvious enough that there is no reason to pretend otherwise. Her rebounding already gives her a bankable elite skill. Her motor creates opportunities most players never reach. Her strength gives her a physical base. But offensive touch and counters can determine whether her ceiling is high-level starter, all-star, or something beyond that. That is why criticism of the finishing is not automatically hate. If anything, expecting improvement means acknowledging that the ceiling is worth discussing.
These games are so hard to watch, basically glorified high school ball. There's truth to that statement. Sometimes these games are brutal. Brutal. Even fever games, sometimes you're like, there will be stretches for 15 minutes of real actual time where you're like, why am I doing this to myself? That question gets asked during watch parties.
The host broadens the attack here to the quality of WNBA games themselves, calling stretches difficult to watch. That is obviously subjective, but it points to another reason this kind of performance attracts such disproportionate attention. The league is under a microscope. More people are watching clips. More people are debating fundamentals. More people are comparing the product with men's basketball. college basketball, and previous eras of women's basketball. Every ugly possession now gets replayed thousands of times instead of disappearing into a box score. That creates pressure, but it also creates opportunity. If the WNBA wants new fans to stay, the stars are going to drive the conversation. Reese is one of those stars whether critics like it or not. Clark is one of those stars whether her critics like it or not. Their strengths bring attention. Their mistakes bring attention. That means player development becomes part of the entertainment product. Fans will watch to see whether Reese adds touch. They will watch to see whether Clark cuts down costly turnovers. They will watch to see whether defenses find new answers. That is what makes rivalries valuable. Not because one player has to be destroyed for the other to succeed, but because each gives the audience a reason to track improvement. And this game gave Reese a very clear challenge. The next time a long, disciplined interior defender takes away the first move, what is plan B? If she develops that answer, performances like this become useful growing pains. If she does not, teams will copy the blueprint. That is what scouting is. You find the pressure point and attack it until the player proves you cannot.
Angel Reese is all time. All time. It's not just her. It's not just her. It's not just her.
So no, one game does not erase Angel Reese's rebounding, physicality, popularity, or upside. And no, 16 rebounds do not erase an offensive performance that deserves criticism. Both statements can exist together. The Clark comparison will continue because the rivalry is too valuable, the fan bases are too invested, and both players are too important to the league's attention machine for that conversation to disappear. But this game showed why their current offensive toolboxes are not remotely identical. Clark can have a poor scoring night and still force a defense to react to her shooting and passing. Reese's challenge is building enough counters that a defender cannot simply sit on the paint, contest the same finishing zones, and dare her to solve the problem possession after possession. That is the real lesson. Not the memes, not the nicknames, not the fan war victory laps. Development. Because the difference between a player who puts up numbers and a player who controls matchups is the ability to punish whatever the defense chooses. Now you decide. Was this simply one nightmare game that deserves to be forgotten immediately, or did Shakira Austin expose an offensive weakness teams are going to keep targeting until Angel Reese develops another answer? Drop your choice in the comments. Like the video if you want more breakdowns without the sugarcoating, and subscribe for the next one.